pop art, introducing pop art, and specifically Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein. And I was excited to share with you what I knew about those guys and the kind of the start of pop art. Today, I want to show you some artwork and some information about Romero Britto, who is a Brazilian pop artist. He's in some ways just so similar to them, but then in other ways completely different. He is a really interesting guy. He's a little bit like Takashi Murakami, who we talked about in our first week of this color unit, because he's completely collaborative and interested in working with as many people as possible to get his artwork out to the public and the world. He's really about promoting himself, you know, and getting things like merchandising and merch out there to everybody. It's really interesting because when I didn't know a lot about him at all until I started researching, and I read that he said that he wanted to be like a diplomat when he was a child, someone who could work to bring people together and kind of help, you know, in a worldly sort of way. And that he sees his role now as an artist in doing exactly that and achieving that. And it's really interesting because he calls his artwork and his art world as being like this happiness movement. So he views his art as being like the purpose of it is to create happiness and bring people together. So he's kind of unashamed in his mission of making people happy, making his art to create happiness. And I think that's kind of adorable. So let's take a look at this one short clip here that I have that's him talking about his artwork.
I mean, the type of work that I create here in the studio is mostly like all my paintings, all my drawings, all my sketches for sculptures, everything start right here. But because, you know, I start many pieces all at the same time, there's always something going on. It's never like, you know, I have a moment that like a space in between one piece to another that I don't have nothing to do it. So as I'm creating one piece, more ideas come out. The problem is not about the ideas, is basically the time to do everything that I have in mind, you know, but the creative process for me is very easy. It's very spontaneous. I come over here, put the music, and I start my day. You know, I like very much my work to look really organized and clean, and I want to kind of create this perfect world that only my art I can have it and make it happen. And then I start adding like polka dots and stripes and things like that. And for me, this symbolized a lot of stuff for me, the circles and the lines. And I start putting my name repeating many, many times. And then I start adding all the colors before I use only very basic colors. And then I start adding like pastels and metallics, and, you know. But I do like the idea of consistency, and even with my work, with my colors, you know, like the yellow I used for a long time. And it took me a while for me to like change. Just recently I add some more colors. But I like the idea of keeping the same colors for quite a while. Even though I like changes, but I like consistency also. I like kind of every day something new, but I also like the idea of preserving the past also. I think the most challenging part for me is that every time you only do a piece of art, also you tell your story, and the painting cannot talk like the whole story, you know, only half of it. And the other one, people are gonna have their interpretation of what the artist is talking about. And sometimes it's not just one painting that can tell you a story. You have to put together many paintings to tell for somebody to understand what the person is talking about, because one painting cannot just say everything about the artist or the painting itself.
Okay, so that really was just a tiny little snippet of um, his style, which, oops, sorry, which oh,
I mean, the type of work.
I'm trying to get it into present mode again, but okay, guess I'm not. So a couple of things to note. I liked how when you looked around his studio, you could see all the stuff that was in progress. You could see that some of them um, were, you know, in various stages without the black outline that you can see, without the patterning that you can see. I like that he is very accessible. So like he, just like Takashi Murakami, collaborates with people so much. Like most of his artwork is either in collaboration with a museum, nowadays is with a museum or a charity or a kids group. It's very accessible. He wants to share what he's doing. He's not sort of aloof. He's really sort of just out there. His sources and his ideas come from, because he's a pop artist, come from popular imagery, and they're very relatable. So his artwork has that accessible sort of feeling to it that most people find pleasing and attractive. They don't. It doesn't feel removed from us like a high art sort of art would feel, which is something that we keep talking about. Also, is that that difference between high art and just kind of like accessible pop art. So if we go to this now, so the other purpose today, besides just introducing this new artist, Romero Britto being a Brazilian pop artist, a contemporary Brazilian pop artist, is to introduce the artworks today. So in addition to doing that little kind of intro on him, I want to take you through the artwork choice. So if you feel inspired by Romero Britto, and not only, I didn't get a chance, I forgot, I realized, to link to his website. So I'm going to have to come back and do that. But if you get into this art slideshow for him, because you're interested in this artwork choice, I'll add a link to his website here. But let's take a look at more of his artworks. If you choose this and you want to come here and see more about him, this link right here to this video is a little bit longer. It's about 7 minutes, and I really think you should look at it if you choose this option, because it goes into a little bit, it has a lot more examples. For instance, it has him talking, it has more information about him. So I think you should definitely watch that if you are interested in this option, but not right now. I tried to go past it, sorry. But you see what I mean? It's got tons of examples. Okay, so let's talk about some characteristics of Romero's work. First of all, like I said, his main goal is happiness. He's literally called himself the ambassador of happiness. Like that's what his artwork is about to him. And that's what he's trying to communicate and spread through his artwork. So he's pretty upfront about that. And it may sound corny and sappy, but like in the large scheme of things, I think that that's a pretty good goal to share. So he's not the first artist that we've studied this year that has a goal of communicating through his artwork, you know, and I think that when you look at his artwork, you probably can pick up on that. I mean, I don't think that he's not doing a good job communicating that. So he's pretty successful at sorry, I got distracted by the chat for a second. He's pretty successful at communicating happiness through his colors, through his subjects, through a lot of things. His artwork is very colorful. It has solid areas of color. First, he puts that down. It's very smooth. So he's doing all his mixing off canvas and then putting it on. And then he comes back and puts in patterned overlays and shapes by hand. And then lastly, in the process are these heavy outlines. So in a sort of similar way, some of you have been choosing the color wheel options when we've been working on the color wheels, and that's a big process. And I've been showing you, like, at least in our apps, how you move that line art to the top. And essentially that means like you're doing it last in a way. If it was a painting, you'd be doing it last because it's on top and it's primary. So he's doing that. I don't know if you picked it up in the video, but if you were looking closely, there were a couple paintings where it was all flat shapes and no outline, because you put that on top, you can see it's pure, nothing is coming over it. So if you were going to do one of these artworks, you would want to make sure on your iPad that your line art layer was on top, totally untouched. And if you were doing it on paper, you would do that bold outline last, either with paint or with marker. So he's pretty, consistent with this style. The solid areas of color and the very colorful areas look like they're just like, what? There's no color scheme there. That is just like bright and crazy, but that's not true. And if we look at the next couple, which are even more colorful, there is some separation into color schemes. Like oftentimes the background is going to be separated into cool versus warm. So even this one, which is pretty much the busiest one I could find, he has like the foreground or the subject matter is warm, the background is cool. Okay, and that is like kind of a consistent thing he's got going, that he tries to separate the subjects by cool versus warm, to let it separate itself so it doesn't get crazy and overwhelming. Okay, and I think that he's pretty good at doing that, because with all the detail that's packed in here, with the shapes, the patterns, and all the colors, it's so bright. He needs that. Otherwise, it would just be like overwhelming and like you couldn't tell what's happening. So for example, in this one, there's a warm versus cool color scheme, subject versus background. And that happens a lot to help us be able to tell like what is going on. Okay. And I think specifically he mentioned yellow. There are some colors that he uses kind of over and over again. I think red is another one that I see a lot of, and then variations on that he uses consistently to sort of tie and unify his artworks together. So now if we look at the patterning, what I had originally kind of interpreted as like the pi symbol, you see that down at the bottom in the white area, that's his signature. That is so cool. So he's using lines and shapes as pattern and detail to separate some shapes and areas from others, to create more visual texture, to add depth and surface texture. So he's being very deliberate in all of his choices, even though maybe it looks like it's kind of random. Anybody have any questions so far on Romero Britto? Okay, so if you were choosing this artwork choice, you can do this on paper or on your iPad. Also, actually, before I start that, I did remember how I said he makes a lot of artwork for like purposes or charities or with organizations. I did want to point out, I can't remember the exact event, but this one on my slide here was for like a Pride event. So I had put that one on here just because the one that I was creating that you can see my sketch for has a similar sort of theme. And so I put those together because I thought that was a nice comparison. Okay, so starting on paper or an iPad, you really need to start with a sketch. You should not just wing it, okay? Because it is going to require a little bit of planning as far as where you lay down colors or different values of colors. So please start with a sketch. You should be looking at examples of his artwork. And like I said, I'm going to put up a link to his website so you can see more. And possibly if you're in this show because you want to do this, look at the video that I had at the beginning. Start with your focal point and work your way out from there. Draw your way out, reinforcing your focal point as you go. Use big, bold lines. Nothing except for some of those surface patterns at the end, and not even those really, is small and thin in this artwork. So use big, bold lines, even in your sketch. So even if you're working on paper, maybe sketch with a marker and then use that, like set it aside, say, here's my sketch, I'm looking at it, or set it under your other paper so you can see it. But I would recommend not using a pencil ever on your sketch or on your drawing, because there's nothing that skinny here. So it'll create like a false size issue, use a big fat marker to sketch. So you can see when I was working in fresco, I used a big heavy sketching pencil not a tiny one, okay? Don't be afraid to try a couple of different ideas and draw what makes you happy. At the bottom line here is that that's how he proceeded, and that's what you should keep in mind as well. Okay, so when it gets to adding color, pretty much all the colors are on limits, you know, they're a go, but you need to make deliberate choices about what you use and where you put it. So like he did, and like we were mentioning, maybe warm versus cool, dark versus light, you know, to bring things forward and back and to separate them so it doesn't get completely chaotic. So in addition to that, you should be thinking about how the colors make you feel. Now, we haven't always said those kinds of things as we've been proceeding through this color unit or anything else this year, but with his, that actually makes a difference. Those warm colors, do they make you feel happy? Do cool colors on certain things bring the opposite effect? Where you put the colors and values make a difference. So think about that. And I included a screenshot of my work in progress so that you can see all the layers I'm using. It is essential that you put all of your different things on different layers. I can't stress that enough. Okay, so here's where I am in my progress. So I don't have a screenshot, but I will. After the color comes patterns. Patterns are going to be many places, but not everywhere. Excuse me. On this slide right here, I have like an example I just pulled from the internet where somebody else was like, here's some ideas I came up with for Romero Britto patterns. Those are not the only patterns you could use. Those are not the only Romero Britto patterns. Those are just ideas. So you can draw whatever you want for patterns. You can look at Romero Britto artworks and draw patterns from there. You can come up with your own. You can look at these. It's whatever you want, okay? You should be deliberate with your choices of patterns, where you put them, how many you use, how they're used, do they, you know, all of those things. Like I said, they're not going to be everywhere. Some are going to be real wide and simple, like look at how these stripes are just kind of leading us towards that house focal point. Others might be kind of big and loopy, like these right here. If you have a quilter in your family, you might see this too. This reminds me of free range quilting. Other things like his signature, so cool. Those appear in like every one of his artworks. Okay, you know, straight lines with a squiggle. Like he said, some of those patterns mean things to him. Others are going to serve as just like a background surface texture. So you need to decide where you're putting them and why. Now, let's say that you make some and you're drawing them and it's like, oh, screw that up. Oh, do it again. Oh, screw that up. Do it again. Oh, I want to make it bigger. If you put those on their own layer, you could do that a million times. If you draw right on your red, you can't. So you must use separate layers. Then you can draw little swirls 7,000 times to get it just how you want. Or you can draw the swirl and be like, you know what, this would look better if I made it a little bit bigger, and you can transform and make it bigger or smaller. Okay. So I will probably record a little video of me working on patterns and showing exactly that, how I could add patterns and then transform them to be what I want on their own layers, and add that this weekend. Okay, so you can look for that over the weekend if you are interested in this project. There's my slide for what I have coming. Okay, so that is option 1 for the artworks. Does anybody have any questions on, actually it's not option 1, I lied, that's option 2. Does anybody have any questions on first Romero Britto or that option for artwork this week? I don't think I had anything in there about subject matter because it's just stuff that makes you happy and it's simple subject matter. So no questions on that? All right. The next artwork, which is actually the first option, is to create a pop art style artwork with an exclamation word. So this is obviously taken from inspiration from Roy Lichtenstein, creating a pop art style artwork with an exclamation word or phrase. So these are all three examples of, these are artworks by Roy Lichtenstein, okay? So remember, when we were looking at his artwork, he was primarily just using a primary color scheme. He drew his inspiration from comics from the 50s and 60s and pop culture in general, but mostly comics. He had a lot of black, kind of heavy line, and he used those Ben-Day dots, which are those little circles, okay? So when we're looking at those characteristics, that's what you want to keep in mind. Not that you're copying in any of these cases the artist specifically, their artwork, right? You're creating your own original artwork, but you're picking up those characteristics and you're utilizing them, you're being inspired by them, you're kind of looking at their artwork and saying, how can I use some of these elements of the style, but make my own artwork, okay? That's how I want you to think about this. So like I said, he was most often creating these bursts of color and excitement. His figures, if he's using figures, they're having feelings, is how I put that, because they're over dramatic. The girls are like, oh, Brad. And the men are like, shut up, dumb woman. You know, it's kind of like exploring that over dramatic relationship that was evident in the 60s in comics. So he took comics and he simplified them. Like, he didn't transpose the entire thing and then paint it. He simplified, he moved things around. They're colorful and bright. There are a lot of simple black, heavy contour lines, as you can see in these artworks. So that could happen by, like, you know, you could trace over stuff, or you could bring it into an app and sort of simplify it, or you could just draw by hand. Primary color scheme, red, blue, yellow, black, and white. And then, of course, those Ben-Day dots, which are those little dots everywhere that are evenly spaced and create the illusion of value or a color change. Okay, so this slide looks a little overwhelming with the amount of words, but it's just an idea sort of generator to help you when you get started. So you can work on paper or your iPad. Again, start with a sketch, do not wing it. Again, look at examples of his artwork, including, if you want, go to the website or do a Google search. He had a lot of layering and overlap. So when you start building your artwork, you know, you have maybe the word, and then you have the burst, and then you have more burst or clouds or things pointing in. So there's a lot of overlap and layering, okay? More so with those than with the, like, pictures of the women comic, you know, faces, but still some. You want to, again, use big, bold lines. None of these are like thin. Everything's got that heavy outline. So I would, again, recommend using marker and not just pencil. Don't be afraid to try a couple ideas. Okay, so then I was thinking, if you were going to do this, how would you go about it? Like, what kind of subjects in word or text? Because I don't think many of you would be super engaged if you were making comics, or if you were using and creating artworks that look like stuff from the 60s, right? Like, I don't think you'd be very motivated if you were making artwork that looked like Roy Lichtenstein's exactly. So how can we make it relevant for the 2021 sort of year? So for subject matter, instead of comics from the 60s, you could use, for inspiration, comics from right now, or Japanese manga, or video game characters. All of those would be, you know, similar to what he was using, but from today. And for words, instead of things like pow and kabang, like they used in the 60s, you could use trendy jargon and lingo from now. So this is a little bit dated, but like it could say yeet, stuff like that, okay? Or other meme phrases, or TikTok phrases, stuff like that, that you guys would know that I'm not going to embarrass myself anymore by trying to say. All right, so here's my sketch. It is ugly. That's okay. That's what thumbnail sketches are supposed to be, because when I load up my Pac-Man, that's Pac-Man. It looks like a really scary plant thing, but that is my Pac-Man. and he's saying nom nom nom, and those are like the dots, and there's going to be explosion or whatever, and Ben-Day dots are going to go perfect with his little those little things that he was eating. And it's going to be a perfect color scheme match with red, yellow, blue. I'm so excited, but I haven't gotten there yet. But I also had other ideas like saying bazinga, which is from the Big Bang Theory, or the Mario mushroom, which I think is a great pop culture image. So these are my sketches. That's as far as I've gotten so far. You want to stick with the color scheme that Roy used, which was red, yellow, blue, white, and black, unless you have a really good reason, because sometimes that happens in art, but you better be ready to defend it. Okay. And remember to put different colors and values where they really matter. Excuse me. So here are some examples that I found on the internet, okay? Because I haven't done any of these projects before, so this is all brand new, and I have to make my own or find them from other places. So these are internet examples I found where people were like, these are examples and artworks inspired by his style. And I thought, yeah, these kind of look like what I have in mind for contemporary Roy Lichtenstein examples. So the kind of things that remind me of what I would be thinking of. This right here, I found so many examples of because this was like a homeschooling project that went literally around the world. Like I found a bunch of examples here in the USA, and then I found examples people posting on the internet from like Germany and other places. So you could do this on paper, or you could do it like these look like they're done in cardboard. You could do it with any kind of cardboard, even like a cereal box, where you cut out the shapes and glue them so it's actually three-dimensional. And these definitely look like they were painted. So that's kind of fun. Like if you want to do that kind of thing, that like a three-dimensional collage, or you could just do it on paper or on your iPad. But I thought that was a really sort of kind of interesting and neat interpretation. This is a portrait version, so it kind of combines two of his ideas of using the portrait and those words. And this was another example. This is lacking the Ben-Day dots, but I still thought it was kind of clever, a nice interpretation. And then here's another one. Okay, so any questions on, and like I said, I'm behind on my example of that, but that's my sketch, and I'm definitely going to do the Pac-Man one. I'm going to see how many artworks I can do of Pac-Man this year. Very excited about that. All right, any other questions about, or any questions about option number one? Okay, lastly, we have option 3, which is to create a pop art style. Oh, I hit the wrong thing, my bad. Pop art style portrait presented in the Andy Warhol style. So Andy Warhol did a lot of these portraits, okay? And yes, you can choose a photo from the internet. Okay, so if you wanted, you could go home and take a picture, or at home, you could take a picture of yourself, or your mom or your boyfriend. That's fine. But if you wanted, you could use a picture from the internet. So characteristics of Andy Warhol's work in this area most often are headshots. So that's like from here upward, not like a full body, although he did do some of those, so that would be okay. But most often they were headshots. They were most often his friends who were celebrities, or other people, like Marilyn Monroe was already dead at that point, but Marilyn Monroe, political figures, self-portraits, or products. So he did a whole bunch of soup cans, Brillo pads, even did a banana. So they were colorful and bright. There were solid areas of color. So there's no like gradients, there's no shading from light to dark. It is flat, solid areas of color. Sometimes they were offset, which means printed like twice, like a double image, but not very often, but you could do something like that. They were simplified from a photo that wasn't always his. So that's where, you really do get that opportunity to take a photo from the internet on this one. And what I mean by simplified is that if you look at these photos, like here's this giant one of Elizabeth Taylor, there undoubtedly was more shading, probably in the hair, maybe in her eyes. And that's sort of like adjusted the contrast to drop a lot of that away. Okay. So it's simplified in that the contrast was adjusted to get rid of most of the detail. So I can show you, I'm planning Monday to do a full demo on how to do that. I have some stuff coming up more about that. The color, the background is blank. So it's been sort of subtracted or, dropped, and there's color back there, and that's all. There's usually a color scheme. So you might be looking at this slide just like Romero Britto and being like, say what? There is no color scheme there. But he does use a color scheme. It just changes constantly. So he might use warm versus cool. He might use complementaries, might use analogous. So he's playing with those. And that's what I encourage you to do as well. They're done in a series. So you're not just doing one, you're going to do 4. Okay, so 4 versions of the same thing. For your artwork, it is imperative you start with a good image. That's going to be part of my demo on Monday, a high quality, high resolution image, not a thumbnail, not a low resolution image. So once you do that, you're going to use your app to simplify the image and then isolate parts on separate layers so that you can add color to just some parts. So then I was thinking, all right, well then, besides just, who's going to, Mackenzie, hold on, I'll answer that in a second, okay? So ideas, and maybe this will answer your question actually. So some ideas for what you could use for subject matter. Andy Warhol, I listed all those things that he used, but if he was here today, these are the things I was thinking that he might use. So TikTok memes in general, I guess those are separate kind of. Celebrities, album covers, logos, like I instantly was thinking of the Nike logo, but that's too simple. So like the other logos probably. Characters of all kinds, tech devices like, images of phones and stuff like that, and then all kinds of fashion. I myself have decided that I'm going to use the cover art for the Harry Styles Fine Line album, and I'm going to have to simplify it. Like I said, like that's way too, like that photograph itself is too detailed, even though it's fairly simple, but I'm going to bring it into Photoshop and simplify it. So that's going to be my demo for Monday, is how to simplify it. On this slide, this is a video I created very earlier on in the year that shows the basic photo edits and adjustment. So this will show you how to make your photo black and white, which is an essential part of this. And other sort of like color adjustments. So if you wanted, some of you probably already have some of the skills to go through and start working on this. But most of you, I think, are going to have to kind of wait until Monday for that demo. Okay, so let me go back to this slide up here. Okay. All right, so Mackenzie asked a good question, which pertained to the writing, but I want to make sure I know what you're asking. Are you talking about the writing on the pop number 1, choice number 1? And the answer is, I don't think there is a limit. Because if you look, I mean, I'm not sure how to answer that. Because if you look, and I'm not being like sassy, if you look, there are artworks of his where it was like a comic and he has like comic copy. So if you had, like, I'm picturing that I'm guessing you're making a reference to like memes and stuff or lyrics where there's like a good sentence or something. I think that if you can work that into a composition in a good way, go ahead. If it's like this one here that says pop and you want to write, I don't care, I'd rather sink than call Brad for help, that compositionally might not work. But if you're picturing something like, you know, a girl and a caption, then I think it could work. Does that make sense? And definitely cartoon characters, contemporary cartoon characters are a go for pretty much any of these, I would think. That's a good question, Mackenzie. Thank you for asking that. Does anybody else have a question about any of these artworks? I apologize if you are like on fire about the Andy Warhol one and needing some more information. If you get really desperate about how to do some of that, I am not the inventor of making that a project for students. People have been doing that since I was in school. Okay, making portraits in that style. So you can find stuff on the internet to get you started before Monday if you want to, like for real. But I'm going to do all of Monday will be dedicated to how to make your photographic image reduced, black and white, start adding color. That's what all of Monday will be. So if that's what you're interested in, do your oh, that reminds me, I want to go back to the schedule. Do your WAL. That's going to be due Monday, but like not first thing Monday. So that's your plan for your artwork. The artwork is due on Wednesday, and then the rest of the week is going to be catching up for the end of the quarter. So I will spend all of Monday doing pop art portrait demos. And anything else really, if that won't take me the whole period, I shouldn't have said it like that. Anything else that you'd like to see demoed for the artworks? I'm looking forward to getting a lot of submissions from people over the weekend towards your second quarter artwork. So please do that. I'm going to continue sending out emails to people that owe stuff, but I would really like to get things from you. Okay, any questions, send me emails, please. That would be great. Have a great weekend.